Welcome all to the Institute of International European Affairs this afternoon for what I'm sure is going to be a most interesting address by our honoured guest, Minister Caoimhe Archibald. As I say, thank you all for being here. It's our almost our first event after the summer break. So I hope you've had a nice break as well. And thank you for your continuing support for the Institute. And it's my great pleasure now for this afternoon's event to hand over to my colleague Dahi O'Cally, who will do the honours, introduce our distinguished guest and moderate the discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thanks. Our speaker today is Dr. Caoimhe Archibald, who's the Minister for the Economy in Northern Ireland. She's a very distinguished academic record before spending, I think, a good number of years working in the horticultural section, including some in Dublin. She was first elected as an MLA for East Londonderry. She comes from Coleraine in 2017. And has been Minister for Finance and also is now Minister for the Economy. It's a great pleasure to welcome you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
So thank you very much to the IIEA for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon. It's a real honour and privilege to be here with you and to be invited to share some thoughts. In 1958, Thomas Kenneth Whittaker, a civil servant in the Department of Finance, prepared a submission for the Irish government. The paper identified the state's key economic weaknesses and outlined a new model based on integration into the global economy, openness to international capital, and a focus on high productivity industries and exports. A condensed version of the paper called Programme for Economic Expansion was published later that year. The model outlined by Whittaker came to form the economic consensus of the state. In some respects, it has been extraordinarily successful, delivering unprecedented levels of economic growth. However, a new economic programme is now required, one which is capable of attracting widespread consensus, which can create a strong, resilient and fairer economy, and which takes into account new realities. And one of those realities is America's swing to protectionism. This has starkly highlighted the danger of being overly reliant on one market. According to the Irish Fiscal Advisory Council, in 2023, 3 firms accounted for almost 40% of the state's corporation tax revenue, US firms accounting for 75% of that revenue. So we need to develop new markets and, importantly, focus more on growing small domestic businesses capable of competing internationally. Because it remains the case that as a small country, Ireland can only prosper as part of the broader global community. A new economic model must also ensure that the benefits of growth are better invested for the long-term good of society. Failures around housing and to address poverty have created social tension and discontent and provided all too fertile ground for far-right politics. Critically, a new economic programme must address the gathering momentum for constitutional change. It must be a truly national plan, a plan to integrate and elevate the all-Ireland economy. Interestingly, it was another former civil servant who in the 1990s attempted to create the modern consensus around the all-Ireland economy. In a speech delivered in Dublin in 1992, Sir George Quigley argued that Ireland should function as a single economic entity and called for a particular focus on developing the Belfast to Dublin corridor. Following the creation of the EU single market and the establishment of the cross-border institutions under the Good Friday Agreement, all-Ireland trade has flourished. Remarkably, cross-border trade has more than doubled since 2020. And the Executive and the Irish Government are cooperating well to build on this organic growth. Funding has been increased for Intertrade Ireland, which supports cross-border trade on the island, and for Tourism Ireland, which markets the island internationally as a single unit. In February 2024, the Irish Government announced €30 million of shared island funding for a new All-Ireland Enterprise Scheme. And later that year, Enterprise Ireland, the IIEA and InvestNI collaborated on the first All-Ireland trade mission to Singapore. After this event today, I am visiting InvestNI's Dublin office, which opened just last year. However, barriers do remain. On this small island, we have 2 different tax systems and now 2 different tariff regimes for exporting to the US. As a result of Brexit, the north of the country has been pulled out of the EU single market for services and denied full access to EU labour. Access to talent is a key issue for businesses. It's mentioned to me all the time by businesses. Such a small island, such a small island, it is critical that people can work as seamlessly as possible across the country. However, as highlighted in a recent study commissioned by the Shared Island Working Group, there are a range of difficulties facing people who live on one side of the border but want to work on the other. Complications in relation to payroll and taxation have a knock-on effect on issues such as social security, entitlements, pensions and mortgage applications. These difficulties have been exacerbated by the rise of remote working, as more people are employed in one jurisdiction but work from their home in the other. These frictions have a particularly strong impact on border areas, which are at the edge of 2 economies rather than at the heart of an all-Ireland economy. As a result of partition, decisions made in London continue to impact on the North and on the operation of the all-Ireland economy. Britain's economy has long been characterised by low productivity and low growth. Its decline has been reinforced by policies of economic self-harm, such as deindustrialisation, austerity and Brexit. Since coming into power, the Labour government has continued to pursue economically damaging policies, hiking employers' national insurance contributions, prioritising spending on the military instead of rebuilding public services and infrastructure, and continuing with the Tories' electronic travel authorisation scheme to the detriment of our all-Ireland tourism sector. The economic failures of the Conservatives and Labour are such that the possibility of a Nigel Farage-led government is now being talked about. This makes it all the more critical for the North to chart its own economic path. Last year, my party took control of the Economy Department in the North for the first time. We have brought a clear strategic focus. The Department's policies and resources are being recalibrated in line with 4 key objectives. These are to increase productivity, for example, by using dual market access to grow our exports, by prioritising the development of 7 high productivity sectors, and by investing in skills. To create good jobs by strengthening trade unions and workers' rights. To promote regional balance by setting for the first time a regional investment target and by creating local economic partnerships to develop localised economic plans and support Indigenous businesses, and to achieve net zero by incentivising renewable energy generation. Recently, our economy has been outperforming Britain, both in terms of overall economic growth and in terms of exports. But it is only through reunification that we can really take control of our economic destiny and realise the full benefits of the all-Ireland economy. Economic modelling by Professor Kurt Hubner forecasts that the growth unleashed by reunification would quickly eliminate the fiscal deficit, creating substantial net gains for both parts of the island and particularly for the North. Professor John Doyle of DCU recently published a paper with a similar conclusion. He estimates that the economic growth generated by unity would eliminate the subvention within 5 to 9 years. History shows that economic unification can be achieved very quickly. Within a year of the Berlin Wall falling and with virtually no preparation, Germany unified 2 economies which couldn't have been more different. A capitalist and a command economy which belonged to 2 different trading blocs, with currencies that weren't even traded with each other, and with a huge disparity in infrastructure and living standards. The reunification of Ireland does not involve anything like the same challenges. Our economies are similar and already highly integrated. Sterling and the euro are already traded and are easily convertible. And the whole of Ireland is already in the EU single market for goods. The scale of the difference in living standards and infrastructure is much less in Ireland, so the two economies could be quickly and completely merged. Nevertheless, we want unification to be as seamless and successful as possible. So there must be preparation and planning, and the Irish Government needs to lead on that. We need citizens' assemblies without delay to give people their say in that planning. We need a plan to harmonise our tax and social security systems, our employment laws, our currencies and our public services in a planned and structured manner. Undoubtedly, there are significant challenges and economic headwinds at this time, but we have a real opportunity that must not be missed to shape the future of the economy on this island in a way that serves the entire island. To create a strong, resilient and fair economy that supports innovation, creativity and entrepreneurial spirit to deliver greater prosperity for all our people and communities. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Minister. I might ask you a couple of questions first, and then I'll open it both to people in the room and to the audience online. I'd just like to ask you something. Let's say go a little bit further, maybe about cross-border cooperation, and how do we develop cooperation in areas like energy, innovation?
Yes, and I think we have really good relationships across the island as well. I think that the North-South Ministerial Council being re-established and functioning as it's intended, it gives us that regular opportunity as ministers across the island to come together and to look at the common challenges and areas that we want to work together on and how we can try and make progress together. But I do think there are lots of opportunities across many different areas where we can do more together. I think that the shared island unit and the funding that has flowed through that has supported some of the work that we want to take forward. And you mentioned energy and innovation and as I mentioned in my speech just last year, the Shared Island Enterprise Fund was actually announced that covered a number of those areas. So it covers green investment, it covers female entrepreneurship, and it covers clusters. So it gives us opportunities to look at how across the island we can cooperate better on those areas. And a recent piece of research that was undertaken by Intertrade Ireland highlighted in relation to offshore wind. We as an island as a whole, if we look at the strengths that we have in both jurisdictions, we are very well placed to harness the potential in terms of what is needed in relation to the supply chain to deliver very successfully in terms of offshore. I think there are challenges across the island that we share in relation to energy infrastructure, the need to invest in the grid in both jurisdictions. I think we've all been impacted by the war in Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine that saw our energy prices and gas prices in particular soar. So I think there's a real need to look at how we become much more self-sufficient in terms of our renewable energy production and actually make real progress in relation to that. In the north, we have very challenging and ambitious targets that we are required to meet over the next number of years in terms of renewable electricity. And so that's an area of focus for me as Minister that I'm very keen to make significant progress on. But I do think that working together across the island, we are well placed in terms of the potential that we have in relation to renewable energy in particular.
Thanks very much indeed, Minister. I'll open it up now. If you have a question or if you have a comment, if you just say who you are and if you belong or are tied up with an institution. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Minister. Fergus O'Bara, Head of the European Parliament Office here in Ireland. You mentioned the impact of the war in Ukraine, and during your speech you spoke about the UK government's, increased defence spending. And of course, increased defence spending right across the EU is one of the impacts of the war in Ukraine. The Irish government has also indicated that it's going to significantly increase its defence spending. And as far as I'm aware, within Northern Ireland, you have a small but growing defence industry that could possibly stand to benefit from the EU SAFE programme, 150 billion or so, or whatever, and the increased and growing security and defence needs south of the border. So is that something you've looked at? Because the UK itself will, with its agreement with the EU, will of course be able to benefit by selling and, and participating in the SAFE programme as well. And is there a potential there, also bearing in mind your focus on like good quality jobs and whatever, and these are often very highly skilled jobs? Thank you.
Yep, and thank you for the question. And defence obviously is very much a reserved matter for the British government. The executive doesn't have a role in that. And I look with concern on the increased militarisation that we're seeing, and in particular in respect of what the British government has announced in relation to its defence spending at a time when they are cutting benefits for people on disabilities and telling us all that we're very challenged in terms of the funding that we have for public services. They're investing 11 billion in defence. And I would much rather see money going towards fixing public services and investing in infrastructure. We have a very strong advanced manufacturing sector in the north, and businesses will of course engage with the British government and programmes that they are bringing forward directly. As a minister, I'm supporting our businesses in terms of developing more good jobs and in terms of trying to improve our productivity, investing in skills and infrastructure and innovation, and that's entirely where my focus is at.
Thank you. Please.
Mark Hennessy from the Irish Times. Just to clarify, are you saying that in the wake of the Ukraine crisis that the British government shouldn't be increasing spending on defence? And if so, would you equally be critical of the Irish government's decision to rapidly increase spending here?
So I look, as I say, with concern on the increased focus on militarisation across the piece. I think is a really challenging space that we're in. I think that as a small neutral country, that the focus that we have placed over many years in terms of diplomatic relations and trying to resolve issues through diplomacy and discussion is the way forward. As I said, I would much rather see our public funding invested in public services and infrastructure. I think that has to be a priority when we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis, when there are so many challenges facing our public services north and south and across Britain as well. And I think that should be the absolute priority for our government.
Nora, does that like come?
Thank you very much, Nora Owen. Two things. First, I noticed you quoted Professor John Doyle, but not Professor John Fitzgerald, who had a different view on what unity and where it was. And would you have a comment to make on that? Because John Fitzgerald was much more robust in saying how difficult it was going to be. I attended a presentation last week by Professor Jonathan Tong of Liverpool University, and they'd done a major survey. And I have to say, the issue of unity was far down on people's choice. The main thing was the cost of living in the north, and even integrated education was way down. So I just wonder what your comments would be on the cost of living issue, and whether pushing as hard as you might want to do for the vote and for a unified Ireland is not at the same place as the people in Northern Ireland.
Thank you for your question. And for me, the two things are the same. So the reasons that I advocate for constitutional change and for the reunification of the country is to give us the ability to make our decisions for ourselves. So we are at the whim of British government decisions in relation to our public services and infrastructure and the money that we have to spend. And from my perspective, they don't make decisions with the people that I represent at the top of their priority list. And I want us to have the ability to make our decisions for ourselves. And it is for the reasons that that we want to be able to support people through the cost of living crisis. We want to be able to invest in our education and health service and in our infrastructure, and to be able to take those decisions for the people of this island, on the people, by the people of this island, for the people of this island. And I think that when you ask somebody what's top of their priority, it will be the thing that is impacting them most right now. But that doesn't mean that there are other issues that they care about. So I think that sometimes when those things are published and it says which of these is the most important, that it can be a multitude of things that are important to people. So it's perhaps not always the best representation of where people's priorities sit. I think cost of living would be top of most people's priority list right now, but it doesn't mean that they don't aspire to or advocate for other things as well. And in relation to the analysis by different economists, absolutely there will always be different people putting forward different arguments and different assumptions that are put into different analyses that lead to different outcomes. I think that in relation to some of the things that were being put forward by John Fitzgerald, I think some of it has been well challenged in the past, and I certainly would be more aligned in terms of where I think things are actually at with the analysis that was undertaken by John Doyle and by others that have pointed in the same direction. I think that the potential that we have economically in terms of reunification is very significant. And for me, I always look at reunification as an investment, not as a cost. And there is, you invest in something and you get a positive outcome in the longer term.
Thank you, Minister. Question down here.
Thank you, Minister. My name is Frank O'Donnell. I'm Irish like you. And I spent most of my professional career working for the United Nations abroad and subsequently dealing with consortia of former presidents and prime ministers like the Interaction Council that Bertie Ahern co-chairs. I'm fascinated by your presentation. I think you make a very good case for a soonest possible reunification of our country, which I firmly believe in. And I would also go with John Doyle's analysis. I believe the economics need to be looked at again and again on this. And when we look at Germany, but not only Germany, other countries that have gone through either division, separation, or reunification, I thoroughly support the forward movement and the urging of the government of this jurisdiction to move forward on this, including with citizen assemblies. Now, I've lived and worked in Ukraine for 5 years and also in the former Yugoslavia. And I have absolutely no doubt, and I think it's the general view, that this country and the United Kingdom are facing very, very serious subversion by the Russian Federation in multiple domains, from cyber and sea to many others. In order to defend these assets, let alone our people, I also believe it's very important to increase our defense expenditure. But like more or less everybody else, it would be preferable to put it into social services. We're at a juncture historically where we have to revisit some of those assumptions and look also to the future. I believe in our neutrality as far as it can go, but we cannot defend ourselves if we have to face Russian aggression, let alone the fact that the Chinese Navy has expanded by an increment in the past 5 years equivalent to the entire British Navy. So there are serious things to look at there. And I want to thank you again, and I look forward to hearing more and possibly seeing your presentation in writing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, no, thank you for your comments. And I think that part of a healthy democracy, having a diversity of views on issues, and everybody is entitled to their opinion and to be able to argue from where they're coming from. So,
thank you. Question here.
Thank you. Susie Deedigan from the Aaron's Project. And we're actually bringing John Tong, John Doyle and John Fitzgerald together in Cambridge soon. And it sounds like we need to repeat that in Dublin. But my question is...
we all have tickets.
My question is, last year with the Irish Times polling, I think it was 60% in the north and 2/3 in the south said that they want preparation and planning for unification. So even if they don't agree necessarily or want unification, they want preparation for that. I suppose, could you touched on this, but could you speak a little bit more to what you see as the key priorities for that planning? What areas do you think will be impacted and what planning needs to happen now?
Yeah, and I think that those figures don't surprise me, in that post the Brexit referendum, I think many people would probably have reflected that there was not the necessary planning done in advance. Most people had no clue what they were voting for, and those who were advocating for Brexit, there was a variety of scenarios that were being presented and not a coherent position as to what was actually going to be the reality, and as a result of that, it has been many years of negotiation and well, the implosion of the Tory party in Britain and all of the impact that happened in relation to all of that and how it unfolded, and then of course the North was not accounted for in any of the advocacy for Brexit, and we bore the brunt of that in the aftermath and in the contested way that it unfolded, and of course are still dealing with the impact. I think that in terms of what we need to plan for, everybody will have different priorities in terms of what it is that they think needs to be planned for, but I think in terms of a structure to that, it is about looking right across our economy and society and all of the issues that need to be addressed, whether it's our health service, our education service, things like social security, but also what does our economy look like. But there will also be issues that matter to people in terms of their culture and identity, and what are the protections that are going to be there, particularly for people from a unionist or British identity. The constitutional arrangements in a new constitutional setup. I think all of those things have to be on the table and planned for and discussed and try to find some way forward and some consensus around what it is that we will be advocating for. From my perspective, I think the Irish government very much has to lead in respect of that, because they have the resources, particularly when it comes to public services, and what those might look like going forward.
Thank you. I have two questions here about Lough Neagh on the web. Given the serious ecological challenges facing Lough Neagh and the political hurdles such as the mounting opposition against the Nutrients Action Programme, what do you see as the most effective way of bringing different stakeholders together to agree on real solutions? And then the second one, it's from Martin Manzer. He says, is there any way the resources of the North-South Ministerial Council could be brought to bear on tackling the enormous environmental work required to rehabilitate Lough Neagh?
And Lough Neagh is a real challenge, and I think that collectively as an executive, it is a priority for us. It's one of the priorities in the programme for government. We have agreed a Lough Neagh action plan. It is an issue that has developed over many years, and there is a recognition that it is going to take years to fix the problem as well. And it is one of those things that we have to try and ensure that everybody who has contributed and everybody who has a stake is round the table in terms of trying to resolve that, and that is what the action plan tries to do. There is some work done under the auspices of the action plan in terms of research around potential solutions, because it is an area of development in terms of thinking as to the things that caused it, and it's multifaceted in terms of the causes of what has happened there. Not least, of course, that there is the impact of climate change, so that has to be factored in there. But I think there certainly is a need for everybody to be pointing in the right direction in relation to the Nutrients Action Plan, and it is very technical in terms of what it is setting out in terms of the way forward. And I think the particular concerns that came from the farming community were that things were happening too quickly, and that it was too challenging too quickly. So I think that the consultation and that is just closed. So there will be an opportunity for the Agricultural Minister to take on board the input to that, and to reflect that in terms of the way forward. That's of course what the consultation is intended to do. And in relation to the question about the North-South Ministerial Council and the North, this issue has been discussed at the North-South Ministerial Council. There, as far as I'm aware, under Peace Plus, there was some funding allocated to try and address some of the challenges with it there. I think that it's important to say that it is right up there in terms of political priorities for the executive, and that there is a real desire to make good progress in terms of trying to address the problem. But as I say, it is a very complex problem to actually address, and that it will take some time to see progress actually manifesting.
Thanks, Minister. Brendan.
Yes, Brendan Keenan, just to broaden out Martin Manser's question about the All-Ireland Council, like whatever one's views, unity is still an aspiration, but we have this remarkable set of all-island institutions. And I just want to ask you, do you think that the participants, your own party included, are making sufficient serious use of those institutions to further the all-island cause?
I think that there is more potential through our North-South arrangements than what is currently being utilised, and obviously different people will bring different political perspectives to that setup, as they are entitled to do. But I think we could certainly be making more and better use of them. We have a number of North-South strands. They were never intended to be static, but they have remained static since 1998. And yet there are many areas where further cooperation should and could happen, not least in relation to things like we've discussed earlier, energy, climate, those things we are acting as a single island, and that should be reflected in terms of the governance of how we do that. So I certainly would advocate for more utilisation of the North-South arrangements than what we currently have. And the challenges that we have faced politically in terms of the actual operation of them are very regrettable, but they are now functioning. And I think getting things back into a regular cycle, that in itself is a good first step, but there is certainly, from my perspective, more potential there.
Thank you, Minister. Barry?
Thanks again, Minister. And so Brendan jumped off Martin's question. I want to jump off Brendan's question, because I was just thinking, it's a question in your role as an MLA. My name is Barry Colfram, the Director of Research here. And I was just thinking, in terms of making things work properly, I'm very interested to watch the evolution of the opposition in the Assembly. And I think your team will correct me. I think it's only a thing that's been there for 10 years. It was UUP and the SDLP initially, now it's just the SDLP. If it's possible to leave politics to one side, do you have anything to say about how important, remember what you said about having a diversity of views and opinions expressed, how important is it to try and have an effective opposition in the Assembly? Is what's there currently working, and other ways to make it work better?
I can't believe it's 10 years. You just scared me by saying that. But you're right, it was 2016 that we first had an opposition. And well, I guess we have a unique political setup in the North in terms of mandatory coalition, and there is a reason why we have that in terms of the Good Friday Agreement and how the institutions developed. And I think that having parties around the table and around the executive, and as many parties that are entitled to hold those positions, that take them up and do so, because it brings the diversity of opinion that reflects the community in the North to the governing of our institutions, and I think that's a good thing. So I would advocate for participation in the executive by everybody who is entitled to do so. Obviously, institutions evolve as well, and we now have an opposition. There's only one party in opposition, and it's a smaller party, so perhaps limited in terms of what it can do. And we also have our committee structure, and that is effective in terms of holding our various ministers to account across different departments. But my party leads the opposition in the South, so I'm very mindful of the important role that opposition can and does play in terms of accountability and transparency. So I think there is more potential there, but certainly I think that we have to continue to be mindful of why we have the institutions that we have, and that even though we are now 26 years, 27 years, my word, beyond the Good Friday Agreement, it is still a work in progress in terms of our political institutions, and they're not perfect, but we continue to work as hard as we can to make them work.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question here from Samantha Richardson. She works for the Peace Plus funded Developing Irish Sea Cooperation Project. She says, outside of funding, is there anything you feel the government departments of Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland could focus on to support greater cross-border cooperation between the four jurisdictions?
I think that, and I say this partly from my experience pre-politics, which was I was a scientific researcher, so I think the cooperation of professionals across jurisdictions, learning from others, sharing knowledge, I think that that's a really positive thing that should be encouraged. So where we have the ability to do exchanges or to have people working together on a cross-jurisdictional basis, I think that's something that certainly should be encouraged, and something probably that happens very organically anyway. And I think the European setup and the EU funding streams very much facilitated that. Obviously, we have our challenges post-Brexit, but it was one of the things that I think it has been significant in terms of making progress. We are still able to participate in that because it is a useful structural and framework to be able to facilitate that type of engagement. Resources, of course, are really important in terms of actually making things happen, but the relationships, I think, as the basis for what we do are really important also.
Thank you. I have another question here from Shay Cody. He said it is now recognized that the value given to the East German currency at the time of German unification contributed to the widespread loss of markets and bankruptcies for East German business. As the value of sterling is mainly underpinned by the London financial sector, have you given consideration to inappropriate currency exchange rates similarly damaging Northern Ireland business and employment in the context of any future unification?
Well, I think
It's a difficult one.
I think that we have a more robust financial regulatory regime, and I think more scrutiny of those, and I think that very much would come into play in terms of how things are progressed. But I do think that, you know, those are things that have to be considered, because like if we look at some of the reporting around what was happening when decisions were being made about tariffs in the States, you know, there are people who'd be very keen to play some of the potential gains that could be made in relation to also there will, I think that's something that a level of scrutiny will certainly need to be applied to.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Thank you.
Cormac Devlin, TD, Chair of Good Friday. And just to ask the Minister, just in terms of your remarks there that you made in your opening speech, but also you alluded to your own party being in opposition down here. But in terms of defence spending, there have been calls in the Dáil by your own party for increased pay and conditions, which is going to cause an increase in the budget for defence spending. But you alluded to in your remarks about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Surely there will be a recognition, both north and south, that there needs to be, given the new global environment that we're in, that there needs to be an increase in cybersecurity and all other types of defence spending. What would be your own views on that? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think in relation to the point that you make about the defence services and the pay and conditions, absolutely, people deserve to be properly recompensed for the work that they do. Of course, we have a really important role that has been undertaken for many decades in terms of supporting peacekeeping missions and other such work, and that, of course, should continue. There are many elements, as you say, in relation to this, and we have significant capabilities in relation to cyber security in the north, and that's something where companies are very invested in, and there will be lots of work that is undertaken that has different uses, and I think that in investing in our businesses and the infrastructure and capabilities, very much for me is about what we can benefit from in terms of good jobs and prosperity and good living standards and good public services, and that's where I believe that investment should be focused.
It's a big question. Two questions over here. Francis first, and then the gentleman behind.
Thank you very much, Minister. I was delighted to see you starting with Ken Whitaker and then moving on to George Quigley, who fantastically created that concept of the all-island economy way back, which is really very valuable. And of course, it was the case when we had Brexit take place, that one realised that the Good Friday Agreement didn't have to deal with the economy at all, because that was dealt with by European membership, and that was one of the big challenges. I was just wondering whether or not you might say something about, I mean, there's an issue in both parts of the island of pressure and growth in the labour market and the inactivity level in Northern Ireland. And I'm just wondering, you know, as you're sort of back now in this, the Assembly is up and running and the ministers are back, I mean, have you given much thought to seeing how to try and increase the activity level in the north? Because given the unemployment rate, the activity level has to be the key change. And I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on that you'd like to share with us, given your ministry. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it's a persistent challenge that we have faced, particularly in the north in relation to our levels of economic inactivity. They sit in the high 20s, and they have for a considerable period of time. And the challenges that we do face in relation to access to labour and our demographics as well, in terms of the ageing profile. And in our post-Brexit world, where we no longer have access to EU labour and restriction in terms of immigration from a British government policy perspective, it means that we do have to look at the levers that we do have. And it's one of the reasons why I would advocate the need to address some of the cross-border challenges for workers to better facilitate the movement of labour across the island. But in respect of economic inactivity, the barriers that people face are multifaceted, so there will be different reasons why people are not participating in the labour market, and a certain percentage of that cohort will not and are not able to. But there are many that want to and may face barriers, whether it's from childcare, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's other physical health issues. And I think it is important that we are looking at how we can support people overcome those. It is an area of work where there is actually significant interest from employers in terms of how they can remove some of those barriers, and we are doing work as a department to try and support that. And many are looking at the wraparound support that could be put in place to help people move into the labour market. We are also investing in skills pathways to try and support people to move forward as well across the executive, because it sits kind of across both my own department and the Department for Communities, who have responsibility for employability. But it is something that is a real priority for me in terms of that inclusivity of the labour market, that we are trying our best to ensure that everybody has a pathway to where they want to be. And we have really poor, in particular, rates of people with disabilities in employment. And I mean that comparatively with the South and with Britain. And what are the barriers there, and how can we remove them? So that's a particular area of focus for us. And one of the things we have done as a department is an apprenticeship inclusion challenge fund. So we have funded a number of projects that are directed towards people with disabilities, women, because women are underrepresented in terms of apprentice take up, and people from more disadvantaged communities. So it's about trying to understand what might work in terms of supporting people and then mainstreaming that into the work that we do. So I think that it's something that as an executive we will be continuing to put focus on, because our skills barometer, which tells us how many jobs and we're going to have and what sectors over the next number of years, is quite scary in terms of the numbers that we are short. So we have to look at how we're actually going to fill those positions. I think, and to take it off on a slight tangent, I think AI is going to play a role perhaps in changing how people do things, and perhaps that also helps us make things easier for people to find ways into work, as well as changing how we do things.
Thank you, Minister. I think that the next question will have to be the last one, because the Minister has to do an interview shortly. Colin.
Thank you. Colin Larkin, retired European Commission official. Thank God. I totally support the objective of Irish unity. I totally agree the government should be more active. But it is true that a lot of the analytical work that needs to be done has been done by the Shared Island Initiative and by Orange. So it's not virgin territory at all. A lot of the thinking, a lot of the options have been laid out. My main question is, now that the executive is up and running again, has the interest in reforming the way the Northern Ireland executive works, has that died? I mean, the Alliance Party put forward a range of ideas. The Taoiseach at one stage showed interest in it. It's very clear, when you take any perspective, that the executive is not functioning, or the institutions are not functioning as well as they could or should. So, what is your view on whether, in the meantime, we're urging constitutional change, but are we willing to look at changes in the way the Northern Ireland executive and institutions work? Because I think clearly, well, in my view, reform is needed there, and that would in many ways make unification easier to obtain.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. There is a mechanism for looking at how the institutions could be well, if and how the institutions could be reformed, and it's the Assembly and Executive Review Committee within the Assembly, and I think that it is on its agenda in terms of what the options might be there, and it's a conversation I think should happen, and that my party certainly is open to that conversation. I think again it goes back to a similar point that I made to Barry earlier about the reason that we have the institutions that we do and the protections that are built in there. But we have evolved over the past couple of decades, and even the representation across parties has evolved. So, for example, the growth of Alliance and how people's electoral mandates are respected and recognised, and I think there is consideration that needs to be given to how things are looked at and how that happens. But I do think it has to be done in a very careful and balanced way, because there are protections that have been built in there on a cross-community basis for a good reason, and that tinkering with things, unintended consequences, that is something that has to be well thought through in terms of any consideration that is given to what potential reforms could be taken forward. In terms of whether, as an idea, that it has died down because the executive's functioning, I'm sure that the parties that advocate for it would hope not, but I think that the executive is a challenging kind of setup, and it is for good reason, because you have parties with very, very different perspective and views trying to find consensus, and that's challenging. But we do, and I think that a lot more attention is paid to where we differ than where we actually do make progress, and maybe a bit more attention should be paid to where things are achieved and where we do actually agree, because there are a lot of things that we do agree on and we do find a way forward on.
Thank you very much, Minister, for a very interesting presentation, and also for answering a very diverse set of questions from our members. We wish you well in your work.